Hello folks, interesting piece of data I've come across on my rooting out shenanigans and such. So it's called, what is a civil servant? This might just be a little bit surprising for most of you, so let's get into it. It says the UK's unwritten constitution recognises three independent power bases within central government: Parliament, the executive, that is government ministers and civil servants, and the judiciary. Okay, so the media and journalists are often referred to as the fourth estate. This is by reference to the three historic estates: the nobility, the clergy, and the third estate, which is everybody else, or you and me. Civil society, you might say. Bishops and some hereditary nobles even now continue to sit in the House of Lords, the UK Parliament's second chamber. Judges, magistrates and those employed by Parliament are thus not civil servants, nor are the police, the armed forces and those employed in the National Health Service and by local authorities. In more detail, civil servants are those who are employed by the Crown. Well, I've heard coppers, police today say that they work for the Crown. So that's maybe something that needs to be looked at as maybe a change in this. Let me this put up. It's not telling me. Okay. In more detail, civil servants are those who are employed by the Crown. The Crown fulfills the same role at the national level that the state fulfills on the international plane. The executive, or the government of the day, represents the Crown state. The Crown and state endure, governments come and go. The Crown is for this purpose at least does not include Her Majesty herself. So those employed by the monarch are not civil servants. Civil servants are usually, but not always, in practice employed by ministers of the Crown. So most civil servants work in government departments and are therefore employed by government ministers. So that would be Whitehall, would it not? Parliament is quite separate from the Crown, so those who are employed by Parliament are also not civil servants. Well, that's interesting, Her Majesty's government. But it says there is separate from the Crown. And those employed by other public bodies such as local authorities, the NHS, the police service and the BBC are also not civil servants. Indeed, only 1 in 12 UK public servants are classed as civil servants. Those employed by Parliament. The first category of public body is comprised of Parliament itself and the bodies which report direct to Parliament, including the National Audit Office, the Parliamentary Ombudsman and the Electoral Commission. Constitutionally, employees of these bodies are not servants of the Crown, and they are therefore not civil servants. Civil servants. The second category of public bodies comprise mainly of those who work for government departments, which report to ministers, who are, of course, always parliamentarians. This website is written for and about those civil servants who work in such departments. A list of ministerial government departments may be found on the Cabinet Office website. And the list as of 2014, so this is 2014, is at the end of this note. So it looks to me like there's been a lot of changes in the last 7 years. There are in law 3 separate civil services. The largest by far is the Home Civil Service, which includes those officials supporting the Scottish Executive and the Welsh Government. The other 2 are Northern Ireland Civil Service and the Diplomatic Service. They are for many purposes managed as a single entity. As civil servants are employed by the Crown and not by individual departments, they can be transferred between departments without formality and without losing employment rights. This not only facilitates the free flow of staff between departments, but also greatly facilitates reorganisations within central government. Indeed, it is quite common for large numbers of civil servants to find themselves working for an entirely different department at only a few hours' notice. That's very good at moving people that are a danger or cocked up. A bit naughty. Special advisors are political appointees who who are employed by ministerial government departments on special terms. They are, however, still civil servants. Follow this link for more information about special advisors. That term special again is exceptionally important. Many ministerial departments have turned parts of themselves into executive agencies. There are around 45 of these bodies, such as HM Passport Office, the Met Office, DVLA, Public Health England, and Companies House, which constitutionally remain an integral part of their parent department. However, they generally implement... Oh, okay, wait a minute. Which constitutionally remain... Okay, so these other bodies, executive agencies, are still a part of the parent department. So that's sort of a separation. So just running off my head here because I'm reading this for the first time. Would it not be then that you hit the parent department if you were making claims or issuing liens or whatever, as opposed to... So let's say the Department of Transport. The DVLA would be perhaps a sub office of that. So... interesting stuff. Just very interesting, this data, because I have to be frank, I've never actually applied myself to looking at how the actual system of government works. So this is rather interesting, I have to say, and will probably create more questions than we're going to give any answers to, if at all, today. So how about that? However, I'll start that again. There are around 45 of these bodies, such as HM Passport Office, the Met Office, DVLA, Public Health England, and Companies House, which constitutionally remain an integral part of their parent department. Well, in that case, Public Health England, so who's its parent department? Because that's really what I'm hitting, isn't it? Ah, look what your little baby's doing. Look at what your little babies have done. Talking heads on telly. Anyway, let's not get into that. However, they generally implement established policies, so it makes sense for them to be run semi-independently from their department's head offices. Most MPs who wish to raise constituency matters with such agencies are content to correspond directly with their chief executives, rather than through ministerial intermediaries. But problems can arise when an agency uses, in brackets, what it regards as its management freedom, in a way which ministers believe impacts on established policies, especially in high political areas such as those within the responsibility of the Home Office. The prison service is accordingly made into an executive agency. Yeah, and subcontracted out to a private company called G4S, and whatever other animals are part of that. The prison service was accordingly made into an executive agency, but then the decision was reversed when the performance of the service was subsequently criticised. And then there were problems at the border agency when the agency's manager sought simultaneously A, to manage the scrutiny of ever-increasing numbers of travellers, and B, to cut staff by relaxing border controls in ways which were not approved by ministers. Interesting. So this is 2014, so I mean obviously it's just before this mass invasion that we've just witnessed in the last, what, maybe 6 years, especially under the 2 years of house arrest. John Vine, the agency's independent chief inspector, reported in February 2012 in a report that said, overall, I found poor communication, poor managerial oversight, and a lack of clarity about roles and responsibilities. There was no single framework setting out all potential border security checks, which of these could be suspended, in what circumstances, and the level of authority required by an agency and ministerial level to do so. There is a fundamental question of how free the agency should be to decide its own operational priorities. These are important issues that need to be considered in order to define and agree the boundaries between the Home Office and the agency. Emphasis added. Right, so basically all these subcontractors of proper governmental departments are running riot, making up their own rules, and any complaints and claims or whatever are being administered by the self. Well, good, but it would explain what cock-up we're in now and why nobody ever gets anywhere. So this is interesting. We're going to have to start looking at... forget the little flea bags. Let's go to the monster, if you get my drift. This agency... So that's end of his report. And it says this agency too was subsequently abolished. More information about the history of executive agencies, also known as next steps agencies, may be found here. And there's a link. I'll put this link under the video. Non-ministerial government departments. Some civil servants do not report to ministers but work for a number of non-ministerial governments departments, NMGDs. So that's non-ministerial government departments, NMGDs, whose detailed status varies considerably from one to another. Senior officials at HM Revenue and Customs work closely with ministers, and its key policies are set each year in the Finance Act. However, neither ministers nor Parliament can interfere in day-to-day taxation decisions. So it works closely with. Interesting. The Serious Fraud Office is another independent government department operating under the superintendence of the Attorney General, as is the Crown Prosecution Service. So the Attorney General and the Crown and the Prosecution Service is pretty much under the Attorney General. So that's interesting. Why at the CPS when you just go to the big cheese, the ads? They're all hiding, can you see? They're operating our civil system in the shadows, and they've created all these little children everywhere, making it up as they go along. But most MMGDs are bodies which are even more independent of ministers, such as the Charity Commission, the Competition and Markets Authority, Ofsted, and the Economic Regulators, Ofgem, the Office of Rail Regulations, etc. These bodies are creatures of statute. That is, they implement legislation which they have no power to change. Their political independence is assured by providing that they have the status of government departments, but are accountable only to Parliament and the courts. Interesting. So, government departments are accountable to the courts. There is no accountable or superintending minister, and their budgets are usually set by the Treasury, not by the department which sets them up. Also, they are often funded by licence fees paid by the industries which they regulate. The Food Standards Agency is a particularly special case in that it is a MMGD which was created by merging two large parts of the Departments of Health and what was then the Ministries of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. The aim was to reassure the public after the BSE-CJD crisis, which of course DEFRA created through the vets, that decisions about food safety would in future be taken by an eminent and independent body free of political control. Can you see? No wonder we're in such a cock-up. However, ministers asked the FSA to continue to negotiate on their behalf in Brussels rather than recreate shadow... Wait a minute. However, ministers asked the FSA to continue to negotiate on their behalf in Brussels rather than recreate shadow policy directorates within the original two departments. But because the FSA was designed to take politics out of food safety, it does not seek ministerial approval for its negotiation position. So again, they've cocked up all our agriculture, fisheries and farming in general because they're a private body. Who do you think is running it? Well, let's look at secret societies for a start. So the FSA was designed to take politics out of food safety. It does not seek ministerial approval for its negotiation position. Indeed, it agrees to European legislation on behalf of the UK, whereupon ministers find themselves promoting and defending policies, i.e. when implementing the resultant European legislation, which they neither influenced or approved. So it's not a puppet shop, Parliament, it's a muppet shop. They have no power. This is constitutionally deeply unsatisfactory, but perhaps pragmatically necessary, and maybe a nice example, nice, what a shit word, a nice example of the flexibility of the UK's unwritten constitution. So, UK unwritten constitution, UK's fucking company, it's a corporation and it's bankrupt. And it doesn't have a written constitution. England has a written constitution and Scotland has a written constitution. Because they're nations. Yeah, we're natives in them, Scottish and English. The UK is a company that collects assets. So you immigrants that are coming in here, you're just coming in here as company assets, lads, of a bankrupt company, corporation. Yeah, so anyway. Non-ministerial government departments are listed below and on the Cabinet Office website, blah, 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 blah. A large number of civil servants also work in the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Note, however, that UK civil service statistics generally exclude those working for the diplomatic service and the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Employees of the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, and the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Commission, ACAS, are also currently classified as civil servants, even though these two bodies are in fact large NDPBs. See below for a definition. So why are they pretending? Why are they talking out their ass? Other public servants. There are a wide variety of other public bodies which do not generally employ civil servants other than on loan from government departments. The only exceptions, as noted above, are the HSC and ACAS, which have not been classified as government departments but whose employees are nevertheless regarded as civil servants. They're making up as go along. The main categories are non-departmental public bodies, NDPBs, often known as quangos, the National Health Service, the Armed Forces, public corporations, local authorities, the police service. Well, they don't call themselves a police service anymore, do they? They call themselves a force. So that needs to be looked at again. What position now do the police force operate and who's employing them? Because they have told me the Crown. They're civil servants then. Now, they never used to be, but now they are. Notes, the first three in the above list, so that would be NDPBs, National Health Service and Armed Forces, together with the civil service and those reporting to Parliament and the monarch, are generally referred to as central government. Okay. Public sector employment totaled 5,442,000 in September 2016. Oh, so this couldn't have been written in 14 because we're now citing 2016. So it's obviously not clear because it's not dated. I'm just picking out dates inside, so my apologies. In September of 2016, comprised of central government 2,950, local government 2,180, the public corporations 312,000. And public corporations 312,000. You know. Further statistics information is here, so there's a link. There are around 400 NDPBs. I'll just pause this for a second. There are around 400 NDPBs, more popularly known as quangos, or quasi-autonomous non-governmental organisation, and they can be divided into four main categories. Some are executive and employ their own staff. The rest are advisory or specialist legal tribunals of various sorts, or others such as boards of prison visitors and immigration removal centres. So you can see that the legal system's stuck in here. So the Crown we're talking about is, of course, the inner city, which is what's took over our nation and our Crown. Yeah, this is what's happened. This IFG chart shows their numbers have declined over the years as ministers have become increasingly uneasy about the size of this part of the public sector, and so they should. I haven't seen any figures, but I very much doubt that NDP staffing has decreased by anything like the same proportion, not least because a part of the reduction in numbers was achieved via merger rather than outright abolition. And it was easier to abolish smaller advisory bodies than the larger executive ones, and there's a graph, and of course I'll put this link under the video. Some executive NDPBs are very large and or powerful organisations such as NHS England, Public Health England, the Environment Agency and the Financial Conduct Authority, as well as the special cases of ACAS and the HSC, whose employees are civil servants. Prominent advisory NDPBs are the Boundary Commission and the Low Pay Commission. NHS England is the commissioning board which oversees the wider National Health Service on behalf of the Department of Health. So again, it's the Department of Health you want to be looking at. It's not NHS Trust, any of that nonsense. Department of Health. And who's running that? They're responsible for allowing the NHS Trust to run riot with the entire thing. NDPs are accountable to Parliament and are headed by accounting officers and have a complex relationship with their sponsoring department. They are, by definition, not directly accountable to ministers and their employees, although often second from major departments. although often seconded from major departments, are not subject to the same constraints as their opposite numbers in their parent department. So there's more restraints on the parent department, which is our state departments. These quangos, these inner city crown operatives sucking on our tax, have got more power. However, NDBBs are set up to do jobs defined by their budgets and are allocated by, and their members are appointed by, their sponsoring departments. They are therefore hardly totally independent of those departments. So, okay, yeah. So the department is allowing all this, basically, is what that's saying, isn't it? And of course, the budgets are set, maybe, but they're on contracts now, aren't they? Outsourced providers, and these contracts are up to Costco, and we don't get to see that. Because if you go for FOI, it's redacted. We have to protect our partners. It's like, it's protect our business partners, not ensure that the realm is being upheld. So you can pretty much see what's happened. That's what's happened because nobody gave a shit, you know, in the last 40 years. Everybody was too busy being amazing and fantastic. The National Health Service is in a category of its own as a huge central government organisation, which has a large degree of independence, but is otherwise constitutionally quite similar to NDPBs. It does not employ civil servants, other than on loan from, e.g., the Department of Health. So your nurses and doctors are not civil servants. The armed forces are another major central government employer of public servants who are not civil servants. Other public servants, but not civil servants, work for public corporations, such as the BBC, Channel 4, the Bank of England, the communications regulator Ofcom, the Civil Aviation Authority, British Nuclear Fuels, and the British Waterways Board, who run the canals, etc. Well, we all know what kind of folks have been collecting themselves on the canals. What a great method of trafficking children. Some list of public bodies also include the following: government-owned companies such as some banks following the 2008 financial crisis. So that's RSB, or RBS, my apologies. Public-private partnerships and special health authorities such as NHS Blood and Transplant. So why has NHS Blood and Transplant become as special? Well, of course it would have to be, wouldn't it? Because now we're dealing with organ trafficking. They'd have to ensure it like they did with the midwives. Only their own are allowed to operate in that particular field. What a mess. And people go, what's happening? Well, this is what's happened. Innit? It's happened. Last but not least, a great many public servants work for local authorities of various shapes and sizes, as well as in the police service. Well, we don't have a police service anymore, it's a police force, and they do say they work for the Crown. So something major has changed there. And of course, that's going to include the PCCs, which now it's all gone corporate. So they work for the Crown. Well, if they work for the Crown, they're civil servants, but not if they're working for the inner city. Aha! Interestingly, universities are not classified as public bodies, at least for statistical purposes. Arm's length bodies, ALBs. This is a collective description of those entities for which ministers have some responsibility, but which nevertheless have some freedom of action. There are three types of ALB: executive agencies, non-ministerial government departments, and non-departmental public bodies, which we've discussed at the beginning of this. Each of those is described in more detail above, which, yeah, we've done. Generally speaking, those working for the first two bodies are civil servants, so that's executive and non-ministerial government departments. Those who work for NDPBs are not, but there are exceptions against the above. Some of the most powerful ALBs are regulators. More information, and there's a link. It's important to be aware that principal agent theory reminds us that the anticipated benefits of delegation to ALBs may not always be delivered. The agents of the ALBs may behave opportunistically and pursue their own preferences at the expense of the principals, which is the government, which is you, the taxpayer. Okay, so the principal agent theory that the ALBs pretty much do what they want and give everything to the mates. So that would cover all the nonsense that's just been purchased by government, not just the government, but Labour, Liberal, Conservatives together have just allowed to happen what's happened. You know, this idea that you get rid of Boris, it's all on the changing. To the other side, there's none of them going against it. So you've really got to weigh this up. This is, let's look at, when we say Parliament, we're talking about every single member of it. Because they're the ones making the decisions, you know. You've got to see it like this. You've got to get away from this left-right nonsense paradigm, you know. It is pretty ridiculous. And it's so childish that this day and age, any, you know, little look into what it and how it works, you can't see any other different than the left and the right wing belong to the same bird. It's as simple as that. And that bird happens to be a banker who's apt to flicking that coin, the double-sided coin, however he may see fit. There is more information in the Cabinet Office 2016 report on the outcome of the classification review, and an excellent history and analysis may be found in the Matthew Flinders Delegated Governance of the British State, Walking Without Order. State statutory authority. All public bodies need formal authority if they are to take decisions which affect the public and or if they are to spend public money. And public money can be spent only with the authority of Parliament. Government ministers are appointed by the monarch. They and their civil servants spend money voted by Parliament. Most non-ministerial government departments and executive NDPBs are created by primary legislation. That's your Acts of Parliament. Their activities are authorised and constrained by the legislation and by their budgets annually approved by Parliament and their parent department. But UK Sport, for instance, was created by Royal Charter. Interesting. Okay, because in that they are pushing all this transgender stuff, aren't they? And all this twisted crap. But also, let's have a look here. Primarily, so I've said this before in videos that Acts of Parliament are only to be observed by employees of government. And it's to stop them injuring you. Now, you're tied in so many ways to this government that you are then classed as an employee. And providing they get that contract, that joinder on person, and you're leaving yourself a position of beneficiary, you are then classed as under all the government acts, the Acts of Parliament, you know. We discussed that in the early videos. Advisory NDPs can be created informally as they do not have formal powers of spending authority. The BBC and the Bank of England were created by Royal Charter. How interesting. So the Bank of England, which controls the Fed, which we know is controlled by Rothschild, was also created by Royal Charter. You wouldn't get any English monarch allowing a non-Christian entity to operate a Royal Charter if it was not the case that the real command level was actually the ones now running the Royal Charter. It wouldn't happen. It's as simple as that, people. You don't have to get excited about it. That's just the way it is. The BBC, which pushes nothing but garbage, again, Royal Charter. And UK Sport. So UK Sport, BBC, Bank of England, Royal Chartered Operations. How interesting is that? Says notes. Government departments detail. As well as Prime Minister's Office and the Deputy Prime Minister's Office, there were 24 ministerial departments as at April 2014. Attorney General's Office, Cabinet Office, Department for Business, Innovation and Skills Department, Department for Communities and Local Government, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, Department for Education, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Department for International Development, Department for Transport, Department for Work and Pensions, Department of Energy and Climate Change, Department of Health. So Department of Energy and Climate Change are responsible for stealing your money on a fancy. Okay. Department of Health, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, HM Treasury, Home Office, Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Justice, or Ministry of No Offence, as we've discussed in earlier videos. Ministry of Justice Northern Ireland Office, Office of the Advocate General for Scotland, Offices of the Leaders of the House of Commons and House of Lords, Scotland Office, UK Export Finance, Wales Office. And there are 22 non-ministerial departments: the Charity Commission, the Competition and Markets Authority, Crown Prosecution Service, Food Standards, agency. I mean, look at this. Non-ministerial departments. This is where the power is. Let's go down again. Charity Commission, Competition and Markets Authority, Crown Prosecution Service, Food Standards Agency, Forestry Commission, Government Actuaries Department, HM Revenue and Customs, Land Registry, National Savings and Investments, the National Archives, National Crime Agency, Office of Rail Regulation, Ofgem, Ofqual, Ofsted, Ordnance Survey, Serious Fraud Office, Supreme Court, Government Legal Department, UK Statistics Office, UK Trade and Investment, Ofwat. That's all the regulators. All the regulators controlled as non-ministerial departments. And you wonder what's happened. The British imperialists have took over everything you don't see. All the powerful positions. And then our elected body is the puppet face for these departments. The royal prerogative. The Crown in British common law has certain rights and privileges which can be exercised only by the Crown. But of course the Crown has to keep in sync with the will of the people because we give that office its sovereignty to uphold the realm and nothing more. Okay, again, you wonder what's happened. This is what's happened. The Crown in British common law has certain rights and privileges which can be exercised only by the Crown. One such prerogative power is to issue passports. You getting this? Another was the power to decide the terms of service of its servants, that is, civil servants. It was inherent in that power that the Crown could alter such terms of service without the agreement of its staff, albeit these days subject to judicial review. The civil service prerogative was suspended by Section 3 of the 2010 Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, which gave the power to manage the civil service to the Minister for the Civil Service. It seems to me that this means that the Minister can now alter civil servants' terms and conditions of employment without the agreement of staff. Others' views will be welcome. So, again, remember, this is 2014, so perhaps I'm going to have to do the same with the other one. Non-executive members of departmental boards and Crown representatives. Ministers sometimes ask those they admire outside government to join departmental advisory boards and to become Crown representatives who assist the government's procurement activities. Does that include arms dealers? I think it does. And there are lots of other advisory boards of various size and importance, many of which may be classified as arm's length bodies. See further above. None of these people are civil servants. And that was written by a guy, Martin Stanley. We still haven't got a date. And it was civilservant.org.uk. Exceptionally interesting. Because I had not seen it in those terms. And I'm pretty sure not many of you had seen it in those terms either. So very interesting. And I think we'll do a follow-up with the 2016. If we can find one. And then we can see where the skullduggery has gone on and has given us what we've got today. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will say till the next time.